right.
We'd like to welcome everyone to our special call Community Redevelopment Agency meeting for March 8th, 2021. At this time, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Can you read the notice for me, Ms. Krantz?
Yes.
I got it. You're hereby notified that a special call meeting of the Palaca Community Redevelopment Agency, CRA, has been called to be held on Monday, March 8th, 2021 at Palaca City Hall, 201 North 2nd Street, Palaca, Florida, 32177. The meeting is called to commence at 5:30 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is for the presentation, discussion, and direction concerning the CRA plan and revisions, goals, and action strategies, and regarding the request for emergency funding for 418 River Street. Please govern yourselves accordingly. At this time, we're going to have our pledge. I'm going to ask Pastor Eddie if you would lead us in the pledge, and we're going to also ask Pastor Mulberry to lead us in the invocation thereafter. Everyone, please stand.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor Mulberry.
Father, again, thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, for your kindness, and for the multitude of your tender mercy. God, we thank you for how you blessed us all day long to come together again. And even now, Lord, at this special session, we invite you to be the welcome guest here. Give this city the wisdom, God, that is necessary to do those things that will please you and bring glory to you. We pray, God, for every person involved, that you will do what you do through us and with us for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Hill,
Here.
Commissioner Campbell,
Present.
Commissioner Jones,
Present.
Commissioner Borum,
Present.
Ms. Kemp, Commissioner Rawls,
Here.
and Commissioner McCaskill.
Here.
Show all members are present and accounted for. We have a quorum. Moving on to approval of the minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Campbell, a second by Commissioner Rawls. Is there any unreadiness? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to public comment. Mr. Deputy, public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. No action will be taken on topics of discussion. Anyone wishing to speak during public comment, please dial 386-329-0100, extension 0, or you can use the YouTube chat function on our online version. So again, 386-329-0100. If you're here to speak during public comment, please fill out a yellow card in the back of the room. When you come to the podium, please give your name and address for the record. So again, first up, Mr. Deputy, I'm sure we got a card somewhere for you. Give me the card. Is that the only one we have so far?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Sam Deputy, 917 Park Street, Palatka. I appreciate this.
Can you match the button on that microphone for me, Mr. Deputy? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you for allowing me to do this. I teach 3 nights a week, so I have to go to class. Just 3 things I want to say, actually 4. One, I want to thank you for Ms. Krantz and Ms. Tucker. Breath of fresh air in our city. Communication is flowing for a great time, and we appreciate that. I think they're perfect city employees, and I congratulate them for working with us. 3 quick things. I read the CRA plan that's being presented. I know it's a list of ideas. I was going to say that I'm disappointed in just a couple of ways. One, I was looking for more originality. We are not a cookie cutter city. We are a city that have gems all over, a history that is deep, buildings that are deep. I just didn't see the originality that I was looking for. I did see a lot of demographics. I didn't need those. I don't think you need those. Those are common information. Anybody can get that. And we know our demographics. We live here. Ask any business owner, we can tell you. So that's my first one. My second one is we understand the road construction on St. John's Avenue will begin this summer. We're a little nervous as building owners and as an association because we're not getting any information. That makes us nervous because with the COVID, businesses are hurting. With road construction, we will expect 25%, according to the national average, to not make it to the other end. This project will take a year. We need a few months for ourselves to plan. And so we don't want to come up 2 weeks out and say, oh, we're beginning. We need more information and we're not receiving that. The last part of my thoughts here, in speaking to Chris, who is working on that plan in Wisconsin, he says we can add to the contract for that job that the Christmas parade can take place, that the road can be passable and sidewalks usable, but it has to be put in that contract. We canceled the 119th Palatka Christmas parade this past year, and I am working on the 119th for this year and would like to see that it would happen. And so I'm laying that out before you, that we would like to see that in the contract and we would like to see that take place. Once again, thank you for our great employees and thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Russo.
Vito Russo, 415 Emmett Street. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and CRA Board. Before I get into the TIF comments, I am a hydrologist with the Water District. I build and run groundwater models that simulate groundwater flow and how it responds to groundwater pumping. A big variable in that is knowing what utilities pump out of the ground on a monthly basis. I can get on, therefore, I have a relationship with utilities throughout the entire water district. I can get on the phone and I can ask any one of these utilities for a tour of the water plant, and they are very accommodating. Except for one. There's one utility in the water district that I have a hard time with, and that is Palaca. I get on the phone, talk to Kayla Wiley, ask her for a simple 30-minute tour for a couple of staff members in my department. And she does not have the autonomy to give me the point. She told me contact Jonathan Griffith. So I contact Jonathan Griffith and I ask him for a Monday or a Wednesday at 9:30 in the morning, because I need to coordinate the tour with the RC Willis plant with Putnam County's East Palaca Regional Plant, East Regional Plant. Sam Willis, very accommodating. I cannot get a date out of Mr. Griffith for some strange reason. And we are very flexible. I just need a Monday or a Wednesday at 9:30. I cannot get the date out of him. So I call Justin Campbell. A couple of days later, I call Mayor Hill. Still haven't heard what day I can use to coordinate with the regional plant. So I think that I should be accommodated. The water district should be accommodated because the water district gives millions of dollars to our community. And I think asking for a simple 30-minute tour really isn't all that big of a deal. So having said that, moving on to the TIF program, basically, I'm interested, who came up with the draft? Is this the S&ME firm that did this, or is this the staff, Palaca staff? Does anybody know? Okay, well, let's just move on. So basically,
30 seconds. You got 30 seconds.
this right here, this is the agenda. So this is obviously very detailed. And there is a boatload of questions that go right along with it. So I would highly recommend that we have a subcommittee that sits down with the city and all the stakeholders and basically hash out all of these questions that the various stakeholders might have. I have a bunch.
Time's up.
Right. So
Go ahead and wrap up.
I got lots more questions, but I've only got 3 minutes. So
All right.
will I be able to speak during the debate on this on the CRA agenda later on?
You always speak.
And you're
Sure.
very accommodating. I appreciate that.
I know. I try to be. Guess I don't move fast enough on some stuff. Next up, Ms. Wilhite, Mr. Parcher. This is for an agenda item. I'm sorry. You want to speak on the agenda item? Okay. Okay. So we'll wait for the agenda item. Is there anyone else here to speak during general public comment? Seeing no one, do we have anyone in YouTube chat?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. There's no one on the phone at this time. We'll go ahead and close general public comment at this time. And we'll move on to our regular business. Item number 5 on the agenda, CRA plan update, draft goals and action strategies for comment, discussion, and direction.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Hang on, we're getting some bad feedback.
Got an echo. All right, so much for the echo now.
Yeah, now we won't have an echo. Yes, Mandy Tucker with staff. We have John Jones with us virtually tonight from S&ME to go over the goals and action strategies that were distributed at the last meeting. And I will let him take it away now for his presentation.
Okay.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Good evening, Mayor Hill, ladies and gentlemen of the commission.
Let me share my screen with you here momentarily.
Okay.
Bear with me. All right, and let's see. Do you see the 2 slides or the 1 slide?
2.
2, okay, very good. Let me, there we go, how's that?
We got 1. Yes, sir.
All right, very good, okay. So tonight's agenda, we're gonna talk about the CRA plan update, where we are in the process. We're also gonna talk about the public input. We've had a couple different instances where we had public engagement activities and outreach activities. Get that advertisement off the screen there, sorry about that. We'll talk about the 4-point action plan and what the primary redevelopment strategies are. Then we'll talk about the goals, strategies, and projects. That's the detailed day-to-day administrative aspects of the CRA plan. Then we'll talk about the next steps in the process. So the CRA plan update and outline, where are we right now? So we've completed the introduction, the accomplishments, the 4-point action plan, the conceptual master plan. What we're gonna go over tonight is item 5, the goals and strategies. Budget and revenue is the next piece that'll be completed. Existing conditions, public input, and legal description have all been completed. Public input, we had a open house on the 27th of September. We also had, or pardon me, 27th of October. We also had a public input meeting on the 14th of December.
We're losing your sound.
Uh-oh, losing my sound. Okay. Are we still there?
That's better.
Okay. Actually, let me see if I can. All right. And then we had this meeting here on the 8th, and then there'll be 2 additional public hearings for the adoption of the CRA ordinance. And then there'll also be an additional public hearing where the CRA will adopt the resolution to adopt the CRA plan update. In addition to the public input process in person, we also have an online website at mysocialpinpoint.com/Palatka-CRA-plan-update, where you can go and fill out a survey and also leave comments on the GIS map. And so far, we've had 229 visits to the website. 66 people have left specific comments. 24 surveys have been filled out, and 10 comments have been left on the map. So we've got some good turnout on the online survey. So those are one of the 3 different methods that we use to get public input: an open house, a public survey, and then the website that's available. So there'll be a couple more opportunities for public input as we go through the plan approval process. The 4-point action plan, after looking at the existing conditions and looking at the stakeholder comments, came up with 4 specific actions. First, continue infrastructure improvements. The city has been doing a lot of infrastructure improvements with stormwater and roadway improvements. We want to see those continued within the CRA areas. Establish and reinforce connections between the neighborhoods and employment centers and also the community assets. Number 3, activating opportunity sites. You have several opportunity sites identified throughout the CRA in the downtown area. I'd like to see those activated so they can start contributing to the tax increment fund. And number 4, the overarching is encourage private sector investment into downtown. The map that you see in front of you, that's your conceptual master plan showing the programmed improvements that you have going in, existing improvements, and also proposed improvements going in as well. This is the campaign map, so to speak. Now we're going to talk about the goals, policies, and action strategies. So those policies address administration, housing ownership, community and culture, infrastructure, public space amenities, public health and safety, and the regulatory environment. And so we're going to go through each one of these topics and look at the goal and the specific action strategies assigned to each one. Goal number 1 under administration, the Palatka CRA will maintain the requisite administrative and financial mechanisms to ensure the continued cost-effective operations of the strategy. The various action strategies that are listed here are to make sure that the CRA is administered in a way that is in compliance with Florida Statutes 163 Part 3, and also that they are in accordance with the recent regulations that have been changed with regards to reporting. So we can walk through each one of these, utilize funding from the tax increment fund, recommend that the CRA hire a full-time administrator, recommend that the CRA utilize TIF generated within the CRA as primary funding source, recommend the CRA coordinates with the various offices within the city manager's office, building, zoning department, finance department, and police department, and public works department. Provide an annual budget to the clerk of the Putnam County Board of County Commissioners within 10 days after its formal adoption. Administer and coordinate the CRA in compliance with municipal codes and regional redevelopment objectives. Maintain a digital map of the CRA and post that map on the city's website. CRA will also evaluate other areas of the city for potential conditions of slum and blight. The city staff and the board is also recommended to take ethics training and professional skills development. CRA staff also utilize the Putnam County Commissioner serving as the Putnam County government representative on the CRA governing board to brief the CRA board and also to brief TPO.
You're going in and out again.
Oh, I apologize. The Palatka CRA Governing Board shall evaluate opportunities to increase community participation and representation, and the CRA Governing Board shall evaluate opportunities to increase community participation through rotating at-large memberships or establishing a CRA advisory board. So that's the activities associated with administration. The next goal, Palatka CRA will comply with the requirements of the Florida statutes. And here we have our reporting requirements listed. And here we have the specific activities for goal 2, including the annual report, providing the CAFR annually, and updating the CRA's fiscal records as well. Goal 3 under administration, the Palatka CRA shall identify community stakeholders, thought leaders, and partners to assist in the implementation of the redevelopment plan, goals, action strategies, and project activities. These deal primarily with increasing the community participation and awareness of the CRA activities. So including interaction with the various—
You're going in and out.
Oh, I apologize, sir. And there we go. So once again, this goal is to improve the communications within the community of the CRA activities and encourage additional input and participation from the various development groups and various community groups. Goal 4 addresses housing. The Palatka CRA shall promote, encourage, and incentivize home ownership within the redevelopment area. Redevelopment strategies include improving existing housing stock and funding residential improvement programs and stabilization programs, increasing home ownership within the CRA, evaluating implementation of using a TIF increment rebate or recapture program to encourage occupancy of single-family residences by city and county employees, and then offering legal education and consultation regarding title and home purchasing options. Goal number 5 also addresses housing. The Palatka CRA shall support the City of Palatka's efforts to encourage the development of a variety of housing products at different price points within the Palatka CRA. The CRA will work with city staff to develop regulatory incentives in Muni Code that encourage the creation of a variety of income dwelling units in market rate housing development, The CRA shall explore available funding sources for workforce and senior housing development. The Palatka CRA shall develop a marketing strategy and a plan to incentivize developers and investors to construct multifamily housing products within the CRA. The CRA will collaborate with the city building and zoning staff to develop regulatory incentives, such as density or intensity bonuses, to encourage mixed-use development in downtown Palatka. The Palatka CRA shall work with the city building and zoning staff to incentivize construction and rehab of low-density residential development within existing single-family neighborhoods. The Palatka CRA shall establish an inventory of all lots and parcels within the redevelopment area that are not in conformance with minimal lot standards and identify opportunities to aggregate these substandard lots into parcels that conform with the city's land development code. And the Palatka CRA shall distribute vacant and non-conforming parcel data to local residential developers, such as Habitat for Humanity, to encourage the use of these parcels in future development. And the Palatka CRA shall establish working relationships with local landlord and management associations and also short-term rental managers to address any property management issues that have been identified within the neighborhoods. Goal number 6 addresses community culture. The Palatka CRA shall support the city of Palatka in preserving the city's rich inventory of historic housing and neighborhoods. And this addresses historic preservation, researching funding opportunities to create a historic housing restoration grant program. Palatka CRA shall work with city staff to develop incentives that encourage property owners of historic single-family conversions to revert their structures back to single-family uses. The Palatka CRA shall work with city staff to evaluate the development of historic preservation policies and programming to encourage the preservation of historic structures within the CRA. CRA staff shall assist the building and zoning department and the city manager's office in identifying potential local historic designation structures within the redevelopment area. And the Palatka CRA shall assist the city's building and zoning department in nominating historically significant structures for inclusion in the National Historic Register. Also addressing community and culture, Goal 7, the Palatka CRA shall prioritize marketing efforts for the redevelopment area. Action strategies include the Palatka CRA preparing programming and event content for distribution on the city's social media accounts and across different platforms. The agency shall update regularly with new events and content regarding CRA activities and programming. The Palatka CRA shall develop a marketing package for prospective investors to showcase the redevelopment area and the economic development opportunities within the CRA. Goal number 8, the Palatka CRA shall coordinate with local, county, regional, and state partners to promote local events and projects that advance the redevelopment strategies of the CRA. Action strategies include coordinating with Putnam County and other regional agencies and law enforcement when large events are planned within the CRA area. And then also promoting Palatka as a historic Florida city and a redevelopment destination. Goal number 9, also under community and culture, the Palatka CRA shall enhance the agency's community presence and awareness of the CRA area and develop the area as a regional destination. Action strategies include maintaining and updating social media presence as part of a weekly, monthly, and annual operational and administrative update. The CRA shall seek to foster ongoing relationships with inland river cruises, such as the American Cruise Lines and other St. Johns River operators, to establish and support Palatka as a regional waterfront tourism destination. Palatka CRA shall seek to reactivate the water taxi service for special events and other activities to get people to visit downtown, encourage people to visit. The Palatka CRA and the city shall evaluate options and alternatives to develop or refresh the brand for the redevelopment area. The CRA shall use that brand to develop unique features in the CRA area, such as wayfinding signs, shade structures, and transit stops that incorporate the theme into the built environment. The Palatka CRA and the city shall evaluate opportunities to support the development of marketing strategies by local businesses. And the Palatka CRA shall regularly disseminate information about programs and events on the city's website and social media platforms. So a lot of these community outreach and awareness programs were the result of the input that we received at the public workshops. The community wanting to learn more about the programs that are available and learn more about the timing of special events. Goal number 9 continues. Palaca CRA shall evaluate the feasibility and utility to sponsor and support events that support the, whoa, what happened here? I'm going to crime signal. That's not where I want to go. Let me get back there. There we go. Support and sponsor events that support the agency's redevelopment efforts. Such events could include the Blue Crab Festival, Pro Bass tournaments. Also, the CRA may sponsor or support events that have been demonstrated to support the agency's redevelopment efforts in the past. Projects and activities include supporting branding and marketing, establishing relationships with the Inland River Cruise Lines and other St. Johns River tour operators, refreshing or refining the Palaca CRA brand, utilizing the new brand in updated marketing materials, and creating and implementing an updated Palaca Wayfinding Master Plan and Downtown Palaca Gateways Master Plan. Goal number 10, the Palaca CRA shall evaluate and identify opportunities to improve upon or expand Palaca's existing programs within the redevelopment area that advance the redevelopment strategies of the CRA. The CRA will support events and festivals that attract significant regional attention to the downtown. Palaca CRA shall evaluate the use of an annual survey or other instrument to determine user satisfaction with events and programming within the CRA. The Palaca CRA shall encourage local retailers to extend business hours during weeknights and weekends and for special events. And the Palaca CRA shall work with the City of Palaca staff and community leaders to support community gardening programs within the CRA. Projects and activities proposed include regular surveying to measure and gather detailed post-event satisfaction and feedback from users and residents, and then providing and coordinating logistics plans to ensure access and ease to draw tourists and businesses ease of access and draw to businesses operating during the event hours. Goal number 11, the Palaca CRA shall implement activities to establish a distinctive character and identity within the redevelopment area in downtown Palaca. Action strategies include installing gateway identification at key intersections surrounding the CRA. Proposed locations include, but are not limited to, the intersection of State Road 17 and North 1st Street, intersection of State Road 17 and South 12th Street, and then other intersections as defined by the CRA or as identified by the CRA Governing Board. Additional strategies include the CRA initiating wayfinding signing program throughout the redevelopment area to include directions to significant features within the redevelopment area, including but not limited to Riverfront Park, the Mariners Museum, the administrative facilities for the city, the commercial and historic districts, city parks, and recreation and cultural facilities. Programs and activities include installing gateway signage and creating a list of all significant features within the redevelopment area, organized in the relevant categories, and then installing wayfinding signage. Goal number 12, the Palaca CRA shall increase private sector investment, small business development, and economic activity within the community redevelopment area. Action strategies include the Palaca CRA evaluating additional regulatory and financial incentives for potential implementation. Regulatory incentives could include limited or reduced parking requirements, reduced open space requirements, and increased building height allowances. Potential financial incentives may include, but are not limited to, tax increment recapture programs, cost share reimbursement, tax abatement programs, city and county impact fee assistance, and rental subsidies for targeted businesses. Additional action strategy under increasing private sector investment. The Palaca CRA shall continue to work with One Putnam and the Putnam County Economic Development and Visitor Development Group and other regional economic development partners to attract private investment. The Palaca CRA shall coordinate with Putnam County Economic Development Council and provide information on available sites and facilities that may accommodate targeted industries. And the Palaca CRA shall support local job fair and business recruitment activities that are targeted towards the redevelopment area and the businesses within the redevelopment area. We're almost there, folks. I appreciate your patience. Goal number 12, the Palatka CRA shall increase private sector investment, small business development, and economic development within the CRA area. The Palatka CRA shall act as a resource and a clearinghouse for new minority-owned and operated startups seeking public and private grant funding, training, and partnerships with other agencies, similar to a small business development center. The Palatka CRA shall facilitate and support regularly scheduled entrepreneurial education and small business training programs to be hosted by the Palatka Chamber, Putnam County Economic Development Council, Palatka Young Professionals, Historic Palatka, Downtown Palatka, Inc., One Putnam, and other associated economic development organizations for residents, business owners, and business operators within the CRA. And the Palatka CRA may also provide additional regulatory and financial assistance to small businesses and startup businesses during national or state declared emergencies or pandemics. This is the COVID clause, so to speak. Goal number 13, the Palatka CRA shall act as a liaison, resource, and advocate for existing and potential businesses within the CRA. The Palatka CRA shall research loan and grant opportunities for small businesses for applicability of implementation. The CRA, contingent upon staff availability and funding, shall host quarterly luncheons with Palatka business owners and merchants to discuss challenges and opportunities facing businesses in Palatka. And the Palatka CRA shall support local campaigns on social media to support small businesses within the redevelopment area. Goal number 14, public spaces and amenities. Goal 14, Palatka CRA shall evaluate opportunities for site facility acquisition to implement the goals, strategies, and projects of the CRA plan. The Palatka CRA shall prepare a GIS inventory of vacant, publicly owned, and other properties within the CRA for evaluation and consideration of acquisition. The Palatka CRA may utilize aggregation of parcels and properties within the CRA to facilitate implementation of the redevelopment plan. The Palatka CRA may utilize public-private partnerships, interagency or interlocal agreements in order to enable the acquisition of sites and facilities needed to implement the plan. And the Palatka CRA may contract with professional firms or organizations to enable the acquisitions of sites and facilities within the CRA. Projects and activities include preparing a GIS inventory of vacant and publicly owned properties within the CRA area. An additional goal under public space and amenities, the Palatka CRA shall leverage regional destination of the St. Johns River and Riverfront Park with connections to the downtown in order to increase supportive uses and improve visitor attractions. Action strategies include the Palatka CRA establishing a waterfront park through wayfinding signage, or connections to waterfront park, through wayfinding signage and improved access corridors, Laurel Street, St. John's Avenue, and River Street, in order to provide enhanced accessibility, awareness, and visibility of Riverfront Park to the downtown. Goal 16, the Palatka CRA shall evaluate and identify opportunities to improve or provide additional amenity spaces within the CRA. The Palatka CRA will create inventory and a map of all publicly and city-owned spaces and park facilities within the redevelopment area. The CRA shall include placemaking projects and amenity upkeep for CRA-funded amenity investments within its annual budget. The Palatka CRA shall evaluate and identify opportunities including land acquisition and the demolition of derelict structures when evaluating the creation of additional green space and open spaces. The Palatka CRA shall prepare an inventory and asset location map of existing pedestrian amenities, bicycle amenities within all public parks and city-owned parcels within the CRA. The Palatka CRA shall coordinate biannually with the Parks and Rec Department to identify and prioritize parks and other related improvements within the redevelopment area for potential inclusion in the CRA's annual work plan and budget. The Palatka CRA shall coordinate with the Public Works Department to support improvements, renovations, upgrades, and expansions to the Mulholland Park, Fred Green Park, Rotary Park, James C. Godwin Riverfront Park, and other local public spaces located within the Palatka CRA. Number 17, infrastructure. Goal 17, the Palaca CRA shall give priority to infrastructure improvements and amenity installation that will facilitate development and redevelopment projects within the CRA. Action strategies include the CRA evaluating the use of TIF funding generated from specific projects to facilitate the accelerated installation of amenities that will mitigate the project's potential impacts or enable the realization of a Palaca CRA goal. The Palaca CRA shall annually evaluate and prepare grant applications for available potential grant funding opportunities and alternative funding opportunities to assist in the implementation of transportation improvements located within the CRA. And the Palaca CRA shall support the continued development of the Palaca multimodal facility. Goal 18, the Palaca CRA shall assist the city in providing utility and infrastructure improvements that support outdoor activities and events within the downtown Palaca CRA. The Palaca CRA, where appropriate, will consider using accessible festival street designs and improvements when completing or constructing, streetscape improvements or retrofits. The Palaca CRA shall incorporate special event power conduit boxes, such as outlet boxes and banner stanchions and dark sky facilities when evaluating potential streetscape improvements and light pole retrofits or replacements. And the Palaca CRA will evaluate and support the improvement and management of public parking facilities in the Palaca community redevelopment area to accommodate special events, outdoor activities, and to advance redevelopment strategies of the CRA. Goal 19, the Palaca CRA shall support the city's efforts to address stormwater issues within the community redevelopment area. The Palaca CRA shall include stormwater system improvements when designing and constructing streetscape improvements. And the Palaca CRA shall coordinate with the Public Works Department and St. Johns River Water Management District to identify and prioritize potential stormwater improvements for inclusion in the redevelopment agency's annual work plan. Goal number 20, infrastructure. The Palaca CRA shall evaluate and prioritize streetscaping, street lighting, and pedestrian safety improvement opportunities throughout the community redevelopment area. The Palaca CRA shall coordinate with the Public Works Department to prioritize pedestrian-related improvements, such as streetscape improvements, trail connections, crosswalk, street lighting, and sidewalk installations throughout the CRA area through its annual work plan and budget. The Palaca CRA shall coordinate with the city's Public Works Department to identify and evaluate and prioritize potential local streetscape updates. The Palaca CRA shall improve multimodal connections throughout the CRA area with prioritization of connecting neighborhoods adjacent to the redevelopment area to downtown, to public facilities, to employment areas, and to public amenities located within and adjacent to the Palaca redevelopment area. The Palaca CRA will coordinate with the city's Public Works Department and other local agencies and governments to implement multi-purpose paths, bike lanes, sidewalks, and other connections and improvements to provide safe, lighted, pedestrian and automobile connections to and from the neighborhoods within and adjacent to the redevelopment area, downtown Palaca, and city facilities and parks. And the Palaca CRA shall, contingent on the availability of funding, include at least one streetscape, sidewalk, crosswalk, streets lighting, or neighborhood connection improvement project in each year's annual work plan and budget. Goal 21, public health and safety. The Palaca CRA shall advocate for the health and safety of the redevelopment area residents, owners, and business operators. The Palaca CRA shall encourage residents and visitors to participate in active transportation, such as walking and biking. The Palaca CRA shall coordinate with law enforcement to educate and enforce traffic laws in order to protect pedestrians. The Palaca CRA shall complete an assessment of street lighting throughout the CRA to improve the safety and aesthetics of the pedestrian environment infrastructure within the redevelopment area. The Palaca CRA shall install trees and street furniture throughout the redevelopment area to dramatically improve the pedestrian experience and enhance safety by providing a physical and visible buffer between the pedestrian and the car and to reduce traffic speeds. The Palaca CRA is encouraged to undergo crime prevention through environmental design training and identify strategies that can be used by the city of Palaca to reduce occurrences of local crime. And the Palaca CRA shall create a list of properties that are in danger of becoming deteriorated or dilapidated and coordinate with the city's code enforcement staff to contact those owners and provide tips on avoiding further deterioration. For example, if there's a building that has a compromised roof or broken windows where critters or folks are able to get inside or rainwater is getting inside. Goal 21, the Palaca CRA shall advocate for the health and safety of redevelopment area residents and owners. Continuing action strategies include the Palaca CRA will coordinate with code enforcement and the police department to identify and address abandoned vehicles, illegal dumping, and littering within the CRA. The Palaca CRA shall collaborate with community partners in order to support policies that promote health equity. The Palaca CRA shall develop communication tools in the form of in-person community engagement and social media and to provide information on policy initiatives for health equity. And the Palaca CRA shall evaluate public safety improvements for applicability within the redevelopment area that could include, but not limited to, on-demand flashing pedestrian crosswalks and emergency call boxes. Goal 22, we're almost there, folks. The Palaca CRA shall continue to enforce and improve the development regulations applicable to shape the redevelopment environment into a pedestrian-friendly environment with a unified character. The Palaca CRA shall evaluate and propose revisions to the Palaca Code of Ordinances and Land Development Regulations and the Comprehensive Plan for regulations and policies that may discourage the realization of the CRA vision for the Palaca CRA. The Palaca CRA shall work closely with the Building and Zoning Department to evaluate and update the sign code to specifically, get that out of the way, there we go, to specifically address signage regulations within the redevelopment area. And the Palaca CRA, working in conjunction with the city, shall include design requirements to provide open space, connect the street grid, and allow for multimodal access through sites where appropriate, and when issuing requests for qualifications for the redevelopment of opportunity sites within the redevelopment area. Whew, that was all of the different goals, all 22 of them. At this time, we can open it up for questions. The next steps in the process include inputting all your comments and revisions, finalizing the budget worksheet, and then finalizing the long-term implementation schedules. And those items will be presented to you at a subsequent workshop.
All right, thank you. Are there any comments from the agency? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Kim.
So I submitted through DPI, I submitted a couple of pages of comments and questions that were included in the February package, but I don't see where any of them were addressed or any discussion was provided of those in here. And whenever, sorry. It's on. And then I've got a list of things. It continually talks about a brand that we need, that talks about branding Palaca and posting, keeping track of our brand. Doesn't say who's responsible or how the brand will be developed. And the reason I bring this up is because there isn't a one of us who are retail owners on St. John's Avenue who don't believe that Palaca is a destination city, and we need to embrace the fact that it's going to be a destination city. And we need, like so many other towns that are destinations, we need to have a brand, a theme, a way of attracting people to Palaca to recognize our historical beauty and our past, similar to the way they do in Mount Dora and St. Augustine and DeLand and other communities. I see it touched on in here, but at the end of the day, the question is, there are a lot of shells in here, but it's not clear to me who's responsible for following through on all of the this shall happen, this shall happen. I just don't know that it's possible for the CRA board to do all of the activities and cover all of the topics.
So as far as the brand is concerned, years ago, the city hired someone to come in and actually do a branding strategy. It's done during the time I think Ms. Kitchens was here, and they adopted the motto, "It's our nature." And you'll see that on many of the different things that are out there. It has an emblem that goes along with it. And so, interestingly enough, I don't think that the city as a whole really took the bull by the horn in so many ways, right? And really started to use that brand. It's been used more in recent times. If you look at a lot of the stuff that's out there as far as what we put in place, that brand is there. And so I think the implementation of the branding strategy comes from what was there. So there is a strategy in place.
But some of the issues that I know that was raised through DPI and whenever I attended one of the first meetings, I didn't see those issues necessarily addressed here and in some of the prior documents that we've received from the consultant. I had hoped to see more, I guess I was looking for a little more substance other than checklist. Because this is it's a great checklist. It's a great checklist, but I'm not quite seeing the substance I'd expected.
So what are some of the things that you want to see?
Well, one of the things that we have, the businesses downtown have raised continually is the lack of parking. We've raised that issue. We've talked about that we need better parking and more parking downtown. And whenever we raise that issue, we've been told parking's not an issue. People just don't want to walk. Well, people will walk if they had a place to park their cars. There's inadequate parking downtown for the restaurants and for the retail shops. The other issue that we brought up a couple of times are the folks who kind of live on the street that are a bit of a challenge, living in under boxes and around boxes and pushing the grocery carts. And I've been told that there aren't any laws in the city to prohibit that or for vagrancy. So we continue to experience that downtown. And then
It's not just downtown.
Yeah.
So
well,
don't feel special in downtown.
and then
as someone who was a downtown business owner for 2 decades, it's not just a downtown issue. It's an American issue.
I understand. The issue is that for me is that they have been known to accost my customers as they come in and out the door. It's not that they're just there, that they have been known to actually accost verbally and or physically. And then the other is that once we plant the trees, once we do the landscaping, it doesn't seem that, I recognize we're a poor community, but it doesn't seem that there's a lot of follow through. If you look at the trees that are there on the side streets on 3rd, they're not being maintained. The landscaping's not being maintained. And what concerns me is when we take all these steps, we invest all this money, the ability to maintain and follow through. That's a concern.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
So those are the things that are off the top of my head right now. But as far as the brand, that's the first time, this is the first time I've ever heard that nature, it's our way. Is that what you said?
It's our nature.
It's our nature.
It's our nature. I've never heard that before. It's never been shared with my knowledge before.
If you look at the emblem on the front of your packet here, that's what this comes from.
What? I'm
That
sorry.
whole vision placa, that whole emblem that's there was a part of that strategy, that logo. And so it's around. I think we wholeheartedly agree it could be a better job, and a better job could be done in kind of pushing it out.
Well, maybe we need to understand it as well so that we can embrace it, because I would really like to see you know me, I've been there for 7 years and I've been struggling trying to develop a community down in the business area downtown. And it's pretty difficult. So,
Yeah, I can tell you, initially, I think in my first view of the branding, it wasn't necessarily it wasn't my favorite, but at the end of the day, it was something that when you talk to a lot of folks who are not from this area, they like it. And it's something that it goes to really what this is the Trail Town community. And it really goes to the core of what this community is about. It's a historic community, it's a Trail Town community, and nature is really what draws folks here. At the end of the day, it's the river, it's the trails, those are the things that bring us here. It's the last true snapshot of old Florida, it's the gem city of Florida. It's all those things, but at the end of the day, that's the concept that was put in place. I think it would be really careless of us in so many ways to not try to use the strategy and to push it more. I think that I wholeheartedly agree with your comments, but I just think that ultimately we have to allow for an opportunity to brand it and to let that strategy be pushed forward. I don't know, I guess the question, it can be answered, should this particular plan be more specified? I think at the end of the day, it is intended to be a checklist because it's always it's a fluid document. It's not supposed to be just a document for now. It's going to be updated in so many ways, but I think these are just examples of how you do certain things within the document. The overall implementation is something that takes place on the local level, I think, for the most part. And so, Mr. Jones, if you want to comment on that, you can. Maybe not.
bless his heart.
Can you hear me? Maybe.
There we go. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The intent of the plan is to cast as wide a net as possible with the potential projects and programs that are identified. The intent is that you don't have to implement all of the projects that are identified in the plan, but you can only implement projects that are identified in the plan. So if the project is not mentioned either in one of the redevelopment strategies or in one of the goals, activities, and tasks, you cannot act on it. However, this plan has a very wide cast and covers a broad range of subjects that were brought up during those public meetings, including parking, including the maintenance of public investments in the area. So it's designed to give the CRA governing board in the city the maximum flexibility they need so they can address opportunities as they present themselves and not limit the potential actions of the CRA board.
So I think, and following up with that, I think there's a difference between the adoption of this plan as an updated plan versus having a visiting session or strategic planning session where we talk about the things that, and more specificity, things that we want to put in place. And so I think that's where there may be a bit of a divide conceptually as to where we are. You got anything else? I'm sorry, Ms. Kim. Commissioner Ross.
I read this regulatory incentive for the inclusion of low-income dwelling units. And in my estimation, when you discuss low-income dwelling units in a historic neighborhood like the South Side, North Side, TIF areas, it's almost an oxymoron because there's nothing that's affordable to anyone, especially in a low-income situation when you're regarding this type of housing. But I just wonder how that falls in line with the city's goals and objectives, because it says, on goal number 5, the CRA shall support the city of Palaca's efforts to encourage the development of a variety of housing. And the areas that we're talking about are not very large. And I can close my eyes and picture just about everything that's in both the north and the south side TIF. You have very little in the central TIF that's housing. So I wonder if maybe there might need to be some wordsmithing there, but Um, The 12th Street, you know, that's not etched in stone, is it? On the 12th and 17 on page
Oh, where it
10?
says South 12th.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is no South 12th,
That's going to be funky looking at the railroad crossing, I'm just here to tell you.
but that's
So
North 12th.
maybe make that 11th Street. I know that it goes to the railroad tracks, but it's kind of hard to, because it says here that, to me, when I was reading this, I thought that it's saying that we're going to be putting the signage there.
But there is no, but you don't start south until you cross St. John's. So there is no 17 in South 12.
Right. No. But is that really a good location? Because all you have there is a fence for the police department. I would think that it would be a little.
On the other side.
If you're trying to get that kind of attention right there, that's the introduction to it. It would be like where the David Browning Museum is. Sign.
Let me stop you at 5 point at housing for a second.
Yeah.
I think you had a comment on housing as well.
Same question. I had noted 5.1.
Well, I think if somebody's reading this and they're saying, well, you know, the city's going to encourage low income housing, and then you have levels of low income. Is it very low income? Is it low income, moderate income?
It's kind of like saying affordable housing.
Say what?
And it's no different than how we use the terms affordable housing.
Correct.
Right.
So, you know, somebody could look at this and say, well, you know, we got all this development. As development starts to fire up, I don't want the CRA or the city to get themselves in a position where somebody feels like they're being left out because this is inclusive, and then, you know, somebody comes in and starting to look exclusive, and that could I think eventually create a problem for the CRA or the city, if not both, because we're saying we're going to chase this, and I think it's kind of a slippery slope. But my biggest concern is that if a house is inexpensive, that just makes it a cheap house. Somebody buying an old home for a little bit of money may not be able to afford, forget the maintenance and upkeep, just the monthly overhead that comes to heat and cool an old house like that. So I just wonder if we may not need to take a look at that a little bit, or, you know, maybe it all falls back on the city because this does reference the city.
So what are you saying? A suggestion?
I don't know how to attack that, because if you read it verbatim, you know, encourage the development of a variety of housing products and price points. So, you know, I got some news today from a friend of mine I built a house for, and he was telling me what his appraisal was, and my knee-jerk reaction was, this is bad. And he said, why? And it was more than I thought it was going to be, and I thought I was guessing high. And the answer is, well, you know, we're pricing ourselves out of a market that the average bear is not going to be able to afford. St. Johns County did it. Their median income wage earners, their families cannot afford the median housing costs. So I just feel like if we're putting ourselves out here like this, and we say we're encouraging the development of a variety of housing products and price points, I don't know if that's really a truthful statement. And then if somebody takes us to task and says, put it in there, but you really didn't mean it.
Are you referring to 5.1 on that?
He's
Yeah, I'll just go 5 in general, but yes,
yeah,
starts out 5.1.
multiple sections of 5.
Yeah.
Your mic's off.
Oh.
And so does that necessarily, by encouraging a variety of housing, does it necessarily put us in a position where it puts us in a deficit, or does it just give us an opportunity to try to implement additional programs to do the same thing?
If the CRA was saying that they thought the city should push for low income housing somewhere in the city, that's one thing, but we're defined by very, very, very small geographic boundaries. And I don't know what happens when you start having this conversation publicly. You know, it's a tough conversation to have. You know, you and I have talked about it on the side. The Northeast Florida Regional Council is talking about it. It just, to me, when you're trying to start up your economic engine, which is the central TIF and north and south TIFs, and then you have this language in there, how meaningful is it if that's really not the intent of the CRA right now?
Go ahead.
But the question is, have we defined what low-income housing is?
Oh, there is definitions for low-income housing.
Price range wise.
Well, they usually go by income. So we're talking typically less than 80% of the median, the AMI. But, typically, folks that are making that type of income aren't going to be able to afford to go into a historic neighborhood, buy a historic home, do the renovations that eventually we're going to be looking for to be able to accomplish these goals.
Understand, and because we have a number of people who already live in some of those communities, even with TIF fund availability, and they struggle sometime with affording some of the repairs.
You're making my point.
That's what, yeah. So, well, I'm just saying. Right. So, when we just say that low income people can't afford it, there's people who are living in some of the communities, north and south and central business district, that struggles to make the minimum improvements as well.
Right. It's a tough conversation.
It always is.
Yep.
Well, I like the word inclusion. It does say including low income. So, I mean, personal income produce as such, but they come to some money and they can buy one of those homes, and that might be one of their dreams or aspirations. So, I think it should stay. That language should stay in there. Go on. Can you hear me okay?
You know? Oh.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Just go ahead.
So thanks, Commissioner. In the past, over many years, we've used the plan in the fashion that Mr. Jones expressed. And that was basically as a conceptual authority for specific programs that the CRA wanted to adopt. And when an idea for a specific program came up, our first question was to go back to the plan to see if there was authorization for it. Sometimes, it was a conceptual goal. Sometimes it was a conceptual policy. I do have a couple of concerns. And in addressing the question earlier raised, I believe that this product was developed by the consultant. I think there was some staff, there was some community input, but as far as the specific points, I don't think that staff had input in it. But in the one article you're referencing, I'll mention a couple of things to you that concern me. And the reason that they concern me is because once you develop a specific goal or concept as compared to a broader concept, and then you end up down the road somewhere being faced with a specific project or development, which you might not think is in the best interest of what you're trying to accomplish in a redevelopment district. If you've got a specific goal in your plan that supports what's being put in front of you, you're a bit constrained. And so, for instance, and it's not my job to say whether you want this or you don't. It's just my job to point out that there are a couple of things in here that are specific rather than conceptual. For instance, you have the 5.3, which says the Palaca CRA shall develop a marketing strategy and plan to incentivize. That's a marketing strategy and plan to incentivize developers and investors to construct multifamily housing products within the community redevelopment area. That may or may not be what you want. I mean, that's not my call to make.
I didn't know the city allowed it.
That's not my call to make. That's your call to make. But I'm just pointing this out for your consideration. As Commissioner Ross, I think, alluded to a minute ago, I think these are some of the things. 5.4 shall collaborate with city building and zoning staff to develop regulatory incentives such as density or intensity bonuses for higher density mixed use development within downtown Palaca. Now those are specific statements that are going to, if you may find yourself constrained under certain circumstances you may find yourself restricted as to what you can turn down, I guess is what I'm saying. So again, those aren't policy matters for staff to make. I'm not trying to usurp your responsibility. I'm simply pointing out that there are some specifics in here that I would consider to be persuasive, if not mandatory.
That lock you in.
Exactly.
And to go back to what you're saying is that one of the things, go back to your first comment. I think and it's something that both Commissioner Rawls and Jones addressed. Take, for example, the PHA houses on Laurel. That's an example of low-income housing that's placed in public housing, that's placed in a CRA district where the majority of the district, or the folks from the district who did come out, the majority of them were opposed to those houses being built there. And the houses, in fact, have been some of the most appealing properties in that particular area. When you look at even the upkeep and maintenance of some of the other homes that are in that general vicinity. And so it was something where you had opposition, you had, I think, significant opposition, and it ended up being much better than people saw from a business standpoint. And yeah, I'll give you guys a second. I'll let Commissioner Ross go, and then I'll let you come up and talk. Mr. Russo, I told you I was going to let you talk again.
So in my career, those two houses I built them are the most expensive houses per square foot ever built by my company. Number two, they're new construction. They're not old houses. But I'm trying to be ginger, and
it's not church style.
Yeah, I'm struggling here because, if you're being fair to everybody, including low-income families, one of the problems that I've had with quote unquote affordable housing is getting somebody a house that's cheap is not necessarily affordable when they have the monthly upkeep in the way of electric or gas bills, or having to maintain the product itself, whether replacing siding, roofing. Some of the most expensive houses in Putnam County to work on is right on the corner, north and south of us here. So, and then, the multifamily, high density, those words are just, I'm sitting here and my mind is screaming because I thought once upon a time the city of Palaca had a moratorium in the north and south side tips, or at least the north side, that said you cannot have multifamily. I may be wrong, but that's yeah. Okay.
I bought a fourplex 3 years ago. That was rented out. So unless it was illegally running for multiple years.
But
if you can, just for the record, give me your name so we can have it for the minutes.
I'm just saying for the record, I'm not opposed to multifamily. I'm not opposed to high density.
Just give me your name so we have it for the record.
Oh, Matthew Harlan.
Okay. I'm not opposed to high density. I'm not opposed to multifamily. It's just when we start talking about the character and the nature and the historic preservation, and then we start talking about that's almost an oxymoron in itself. So, and when I read that, I felt like it is very constrictive, and it almost sounds like there's a mandate. It throws it back on the city of Palaca, but at some point it says you got to have the conversation and allow it.
But I also think the other piece is you have to keep in consideration is there's an anticipation that there may be some additional districts. You got the central business district that's also involved in the CRA, where you could easily find yourself in a situation where you end up with high density condos or anything else in the district where it doesn't have the same restrictions that you have in the historic districts. So I think, I think if you've got something that does not mandate that you do certain things, it allows for that development. Because we've seen that in the plans before as related to having marinas in those districts in place in the central business district. Go ahead.
I was there when the discussion was going on in regards to the two houses that ended up in Laurel. The initial concept wasn't two single-family homes. It was
duplex,
quads, and multiplex type of situations. That is what at the time residents opposed. And there was some, and actually, the house.
I opposed that. The question was, if you remember that conversation, they said, what type of people are going to live there? There wasn't. I
never said that.
Not you, but there were people who said that.
We ended up working closely with the housing authority and came to consensus about the designs that ended up happening. So I think that was a good thing. I also can say I think affordable housing is probably a safer term just because it's more palatable to people, and there is wordsmithing that needs to happen to sell things. But I do think there's some vacant lots where there's infill possible, even in the CRA districts. I think taking on a historic home, it can be a burden financially and otherwise to follow the rules, to maintain it. But there is the possibility to make a little, say, a bungalow like the ones in Laurel look nice and infill, and go that route versus trying to turn something else or adapt something else to meet that need. Just a thought.
Sure, sir.
I agree with
Yeah.
Brian. That was the point. That was the point I was going to make as well. The opposition in the South Side was from the multiplex. I think it was going to be 2-3 family units, and that's what I remember as being the big concern. When it went to single residential, there wasn't much of an opposition to that.
From you.
I have a question for Jeff.
From you, who wasn't much of an opposition, but there were a whole bunch of other folks who weren't happy.
Okay, well, Jeff, you said low-income housing was defined as 80% of AMI. Is that correct?
It typically, it's 80% or less of your annual median income.
So the median household income in Palaca is what?
About 23,000.
I think that's personal, but household in
individual.
Putnam County is anywhere, depending on who's writing the numbers, and I believe I'm correct by saying it's around 41 to 43,000 household.
Okay, well, that makes a lot more sense for housing, because if you got 23, 25,000, and you're talking about 80% is defined as low income, well, how can anybody afford a house and maintain a house at $20,000?
If you get very low income, you're talking 40, 50% of AMI.
Things like 60.
Yeah, see, I mean, I'm not sure how anybody affords a house with that kind of low income.
Well, that's my point, is that sometimes, and I remember when the economy collapsed last time, and you had some of these antique houses that were being sold for $25,000 to $50,000, and that seemed affordable. But then you have to, there's certain cares and standards that they have to maintain, and that's what we're trying to get to.
Well, believe me, man, I'll tell you, it's expensive to restore the house.
Look what we're fixing to discuss next. That's just a tree that fell on a house.
Yeah.
So
that caused.
And then insurance. We had the conversation last time. My gosh, insurance on these houses are just.
Yes, that is a major impediment for the home, owning a home in the historic districts. That is really a major impediment.
37.6.
37.6 is the median.
15 and 19.
For Palaca or Putnam County?
Putnam.
Oh, I did it for Palaca was less than that.
Hi,
Yes, sir.
my name is Matthew Armelin. My house is 422 Madison Street. I just had, when you guys were talking about some of the vacant lots in the north and south side that were vacant for a while, trying to contact some of the owners that owe money. Just a suggestion. I know that they get sent out for like a tax auction. I've been looking at some of those things, and there's some places that are kind of selling quick and there's work getting done. Other places are just being bought and kind of sat and waited on in hopes that people will flip them. Maybe some type of incentive for people actually buying the new places to either fix them up or do it, I'm not saying the right way, but I'm a contractor as well. So sometimes just doing it new and is going to save the homeowner in the long run. So maybe just some money going to people.
You're talking about the house improvement program.
Some of that, yeah.
Mr. Russo, are you yelling out loud?
So I agree with you, but again, there's so many shalls in here, and that's the concerning part. And I don't want us to put a rope around our own necks and have to live by this document when somebody comes in and says, it says right here, you're going to create incentives. And then if we don't, and then if a developer takes us to task, like Mr. Holmes is saying, there's some pretty smart guys out there, and all they have to do is look through this and say, well, where's my incentive? This is what I want to do.
They produce the grants for the, what is it, the paint, roof, fence, and foundation.
Home improvement, correct.
And that goes on, and that's still active, right?
Not right now.
No, not right
We're
now.
working on it.
Or like, but that is, so that right there, that whole side of it is kind of, it might not happen then?
It's on hold until the next budget cycle.
Okay.
We're working on it.
Okay. Well, I guess that was it. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Anybody else? Commissioner Boyle, go ahead.
Well, I just had that one question. Since we're talking about Palatka, we're not talking about Putnam County, just a point of privilege is 22 to 26,000 household median income from 2018 data.
Okay.
22.
22 to 26. It was 22 to 26,000
Median household income.
median household
Inside
income
the city limits.
for the
Okay.
city of Palatka, since we're not talking about outside of Putnam County, we're talking about the CRA district.
Which is crazy. Which is bad. You got something? Mr. Griffin,
Thank you, Mayor, board members.
your mic on?
Yes, it's on. First of all, this is really good conversation. This is what the purpose of this meeting was for. If I could just make a broad statement as to where we're at and where we need to go, this is what we make of it. So what I heard tonight is staff probably needs to go back and make sure that the action items are less specific. It looks like the goals in concept, everyone's agreeable to those, but maybe we don't want to be so specific in those action items. And we'll probably bring this back before you one more time before we move on to those next steps. It's obvious we need to have some conversation about what the CRA's role is in affordable housing, be it ownership or just providing for affordable rental housing. And there's some creative things that the CRA can do.
But also in those next steps, make sure we get with the business community again to get those concerns addressed and implemented inside of here as well. And I think the one piece that was missing that I kind of asked about was getting to those external stakeholders who don't live in the districts, who are going to be invited into the district for the purposes of shopping and doing the other things that live in our community. And so just affording the opportunity for the other residents within the community to be able to have some input as to what they want to see as well. For example, in the Central Business District or even in the South TIF, whether in the South Historic. So
if anybody has any specific suggestions after this meeting on how we might be able to do some more successful outreach, we're open ears. So just let us know. Maybe we need to go to the paper or the radio. I don't know. We hold these workshops, and this is probably the largest crowd that we've had for any one of these. So
I think multiple streams of multiple ways of getting there, and maybe holding a virtual meeting, which allows some folks to log on, and we kind of take the opportunity to advertise through social media and see if we can get some responses that way. The other ways are radio, for example, and even setting up some stuff outside of the district, like the Price Martin Center or some other community center or church, where we can get information back. Go ahead, Mr. Holmes.
I think it'll probably help also if we can formulate some specific questions for the CRA to answer, to give us direction on such broader topics as, do you want to encourage more multifamily in the districts? Do you want to encourage more of the low income housing in the market rate housing developments, which is one of the specifics, so that we have a little bit better understanding of what the CRA wishes in terms of some of those things. And maybe if we focus our questions a little better, we can get a little bit more direction from you.
Yeah, I think you got limited opportunities as to where you could even put multifamily.
I agree,
overall.
but I think we need that input from the CRA as to whether you want those things in there. So we'll try to come up with some questions, and maybe we're sometimes less is more. Maybe we need less specific directives.
Wholeheartly. I think it needs to be it needs to be just all encompassing, more a broad brush, almost vague and overbroad, the terms that we totally don't typically like to use from a legal standpoint. But I think it gives us the ability to be flexible in what we do. Also, maybe each person on the agency, you go back through and at least provide staff with what suggestions or changes or anything that you want to see involved in it, so that they can take those and compile them together. Is that something that we can all commit to doing?
Actually, Mayor, yes, I'm glad that you brought that point up. That was something that I was been trying to say maybe 2 or 3 times. So
Commissioner, I almost forgot you in virtual.
You did forgive me. I tried 2 or 3 times, but I'm here, guys. So I'm just glad that you brought that point up. I would like to have the opportunity for us to do that and then reconvene again. Okay.
Great. So go ahead, Commissioner Bohr.
And I had just one question around, I know I saw where it was supposed to be, getting the CRA administrator. So when you have a CRA administrator and then you're placed, it's like a lot of burden is being placed on the board to go out and do that. And you have the CRA administrator's primary role is to do a lot of the things that has been stated in a lot of the points. So are we need to think about that in terms of what we're being charged with. If we're gonna be hiring a CRA administrator.
And what
So I
staff
think
is
that
being charged with too.
that need to be cleared up as well from what I'm reading in.
Good point.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's been put in the doctrine here. So if we're gonna say yes to it, we can't, unless we're gonna say no to that and then we take on that burden. But if we did, then normally it falls back to the city manager who would be the CRA administrator. That's what, I mean, that's what we understand. It's not the board. Am I right or?
Historically, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yes, that's what we gotta clear up.
Go ahead. You can stay right there. You can go. Come on. You can say whatever you got to say from right. You don't have to come up if you don't want to, Mr. Russo.
Real quick, when I read that, what I'm envisioning is we don't have to hire a CRA director today, but there will come a point in time, probably in the pretty near future,
Where is necessary.
that there's going to be too much for the city manager to be able to keep that many balls in the air. And then it will be affordable because the CRA is going to pay for itself anyways. You know, our taxing value doesn't seem like it's going to go any lower. Right now, everything seems to be heading in the upper direction. So I think that'll resolve itself when the time is necessary. But
There's going to be it's going to be a time that we're going to have a conversation about Main Street again.
yeah.
So it's going to be a few things that we're going to have a conversation about as it relates to what's going on.
Allegra Kitchens, 1027 South 12th Street, Palatka, Florida. A couple of points about the multi-housing. Multi-housing is not allowed in either historic district. The units that are there were grandfathered in and they were multi-housing for a long time before the districts became historic. No new units are allowed there. The other thing is our previous city attorney gave a very good description years ago on shall means your hands are tied, there's no wiggle room. So I would suggest every place that it says shall in that plan, you change it to may, and that way you have the opportunity to either do it or not do it, but your hands are not tied. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
He learned that from Judge Eastmore. Anyone else? So, oh yeah, come on.
I do have a comment.
Comment number 3.
I do have a comment, yes.
Listen.
The idea of a CRA administrator was brought up a couple years back, and both the South and the North Historic Districts opposed that because there's limited resources in the whole program. So we didn't want to lose limited resources to pay for a CRA administrator. The South Historic Neighborhood Association is willing to take on and administrating the TIF program in the South Side. We're willing to do that. So, and I think we would do it very efficiently.
You have your hand up? All right, so go ahead. You got something, Commissioner? About which part?
Yeah, just time to get her opinion. Is she actually?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Thomas. Commissioner Jones wants to get your opinion.
I can't hear him.
Commissioner Jones wants to get your opinion on the verbiage, on the verbiage in the plan thus far.
As the county manager explained, shall is mandatory. May has more discretion.
The SNME did they compiled it. It wasn't compiled internally at all. So the document wasn't compiled internally. It's something that was brought to us by the consultant who has a contract for developing the CRA plan. So, so how much time, I guess, Mr. Jones? When should we bring this back? How much time do you think you need for us to be able to address these things? Also, that question is posed to staff as well. And also the agency. How much time do you think we need to have some more shareholder meetings and bring back these things? Do we need to bring it back in 60 days, 30 days? How long do you think you need to get us to work so that we can have another 60 is gonna probably be more realistic, I think, or 90.
I can't hear, Mr.
He's saying by the time we get input back and go through some of the things, 30 days wouldn't be enough time. The other thing is, the reason I say 60 is because we're gonna get ready to start budgeting. And whatever's adopted in here is gonna have an impact on the budget as a whole. And so I don't wanna find us in June coming back with this plan and trying to implement, for example, the adoption of having a CRA administrator in place. And then we're kicking out Mr. Russo's programs in order to pay for it. And we got to listen to him talk for 30 more minutes. So, and for the sake of time, I think it's better for us to try to get that stuff to where it needs to be. So that's what happens when you throw punches. But I just like mess with Vito. But I think ultimately what we got to do is just make sure we get to a point where we have enough time to have real discussions, so that if there's something that needs to be adjusted in the budget, a line item or whatever it may be, to get us where we need to be, we're there. Because again, I think you make an important point that the neighborhood associations, for example, or the historic districts don't necessarily want to see an administrator in the same light that the business owners do, because the business owners want to make sure there's implementations of programs to draw people in. And so you've got you really have competing interests per se as it relates to how certain things are done. I think, and so those are the things we have to look at, and we just got to make sure that we're all on the same page as to where we go from here. And I think that's the biggest piece. Come on, Mr. Russo.
Draw people to the community and then shift them down to the downtown. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing with the Porch Fest.
Right.
The Porch Fest this year is going to go to 7 o'clock at night. So then we've been talking to the bar owners and restaurants down there about getting some type of an invitation card or something into the crowd to get them to transfer.
Don't do it.
To get them to transfer down to the businesses downtown. So we're trying to create some synergies.
I think there is some competing interest in the two. I still will contend that that's the case. It's different. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. And so, because it's one is really based on housing, the other is based on drawing additional folks in to do something a little different than what you would typically get because yours isn't truly event based. And so I think those are some of the things that are different overall. But I think ultimately, if we're all starting to put that input in, giving that information to Mr. Jones and to staff so that they can start to bring us something back that, again, we can go through, and it already has most of our inputs in there. We just basically have to fine tune it at the end. And it's a lot easier with a shell like this coming in from the beginning than it is for us to sit there and have something where we all are going in 12 different directions. And I think understanding that our general purpose is to have it be all encompassing, or at least not least restrictive. It's better. Pass the mic.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Rich. I'm a 312 Dallas. Firstly, what kind of salary are we talking about as an admin position?
We're
Constantly starting in the low 20s. Am I like all things pertaining to that?
okay.
Secondly,
Minimum wage is fixed to be 30,000 a year, so.
But that hasn't happened.
Yeah, it has. It's passed. In the state of Florida, it's, yeah.
Well, increments, one point being is some, it is brought in within the next 6 months to a year. What would Secondly, as far as the three districts, I own a home in the South Historic District. I'm very active on social media, very friendly in the community, and everybody I know tries very hard to support me downtown to the best of their ability. And the downtown business is very hard to be part of the community. So I don't see any division whatsoever, and I don't see any questions as to what our goals are. Our goals are very fine. We want to improve the three districts jointly, as one for the betterment of the city. So I don't quite get why you feel that there is some divisiveness.
Well, there's a difference between divisiveness and having competing interests or different interests. Okay. Catch me after the meeting. I'll explain it to you. I won't take everybody's time with you. But I think you're misunderstanding what I said. I'll explain it to you more if you want me to. I just won't take everybody's time. I won't take everybody else's time doing it, but I will talk to you one-on-one if you want me to. You're welcome. And just for safety reasons, we won't pass the mic anymore. Thank you, Commissioner, for reminding me. Anything else at this point? I'll entertain a motion as to when we bring this back at this point.
Yeah, I think staff said they need more than 60
Yeah,
days.
I think bringing it back in 60 days would be fine.
I'll make a motion that we table this and bring it back within the next 60 days.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor in a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously. So we'll be back here in May. Do we have a regular scheduled meeting in May?
No,
No,
sir.
we got an April meeting. So we'll do a May meeting that should put us where we need to be, so that we can address this, and that'll put us right into budget time.
Are we going to have an April meeting or no?
Yeah, it's still calendar for April, yes. We still have our April meeting. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mayor.
Moving on, request for emergency funding, 418 River Street.
Mr. Chairman, I'll start and then defer to Mandy and Jonathan for some specifics. As you know, a request was brought forward to staff by a family who owns a home on River Street that suffered damage as a result of a tree limb falling on the front of the home. And a request was brought to staff for funding from the CRA to assist with the repairs. You heard some conversation and presentation at your last meeting, and you directed us to get some additional information and then bring it back. So staff wanted to bring back to you tonight our thoughts and provide you with options for you to make decisions or directions to staff. Currently, we have no program active within the CRA that could be used to fund a repair. So with that having been said, you have options. Obviously, you're the policymakers. You could either start a new program, something in the nature of an emergency repair program, or you could activate one of the existing programs. If you choose to move forward with choosing or selecting a vehicle to be utilized in funding the requested issue, staff would suggest that we're probably better off to use one of your existing programs with some modifications than to try to create a whole new program. You have a residential rehab program that we think staff thinks would be your best option should you choose to go that route. As I said, it is not active right now, and it's not funded right now. There is no budget for your residential rehab program right now. Actually, there's no budget in any of your programs right now that might be used for anything of this nature. So you could choose to reactivate your residential rehab program and then you could choose to fund it. If you fund it, the funding is going to have to come from one of your other budget items, budget lines. I'll let Jonathan explain more, but it appears that your options would be from either sidewalks or from landscaping, where you might pull money. But of course, if you pull money, you're going to decrease or eliminate the funding that would have been used for those other sources. If you choose to go forward with the residential rehab program, then we would suggest that you essentially revamp the program to a degree, and we quickly, and Jonathan quickly put some suggestions together. And are they passed out, or were they going to be put up on the screen? They're passed out. So that you would basically create some opportunity for some others to apply for funding. In other words, you have a request before you right now, and I'm not speaking to the request, that's for you to decide, but there really is no program that's active right now that application or request was made pursuant to or under the auspices of. So if you're going to move forward with a program, then we would suggest going ahead and modifying the residential rehab program, put some money in the program, and then take applications for the grants based upon a competitive scoring process with specific periods involved, so that you can avoid the appearance of having basically just singled out a request that was made and funding that request, but in the process perhaps using all the money that was available and not then making any money available for any other requests. So with that kind of overview, what I'd like to do is ask Jonathan to explain a little bit more to you about the funding that's available, where the money would come from, and then also you can ask any questions that you'd like about the residential rehab modifications that staff would suggest should you choose to activate the program.
And again, I don't want to take all the credit for this. Ms. Tucker dropped what she was doing this afternoon to assist with getting this rewrite in place. And I believe that, I don't think you addressed it, Mr. Holmes, but you did want them to specifically weigh in on the evaluation criteria if that was the choice they wanted to go.
Correct. There are some suggested evaluation criteria. And the point being that if you're going to create a funding source for some form of grants or loans, these are grants actually the way they're specified, then I think we'd all agree that you're going to have to make them available to the public in general, and not just on a case-by-case application basis. But you're only going to have a limited amount of money. So in the past, I think what you've done is just operate on a first-come, first-served basis, which may or may not be the best way to move forward. So what we've suggested is that you have a competitive scoring mechanism, so that you have a time frame within which applications can be made. The applications are scored in relation to each other based upon criteria. We've come up with some suggestions and some point totals, but obviously you're the policymaker. You can change those as you see fit. Then you prioritize the applications that you have, and then the pot of money that you have would be applied based upon that prioritization and the grant and the applications that receive the highest point totals. And that's fair processes we could come up with for reopening the program should you choose to do so. But you can change our criteria. As I said, there's just a starting point. You can change the points that we've allocated to each. You can add criteria, whatever you suggest. I mean, it's again, these are policy decisions that are being made, not staff decisions.
We have a question for you.
Go ahead.
What's the difference between this and the HAP?
The HIP program?
The HIP.
So this is more of a cost share program. It leverages more private investment. And if you read the program documents in layman's terms, it's kind of focused on finding the worst of the worst, the uninhabitable structures, the ones that aren't conforming to current code, be it plumbing, electrical. We're trying to bring up the worst of the worst in the neighborhood, if you will.
I love the spirit of this. I think my biggest question is, what we were supposed to hear tonight was something on an emergency basis. This has a cutoff on March 1st. The next available would be June. Then we wouldn't would be in the fourth quarter of this budget year before we could even consider anything, if there was any consideration for expediency for the Heights and their request. But I think we really should have a program like this. And, we can always adopt it, maybe change the closeout dates, instead of March, make it April, or something like this, or have the latitude within the document on an emergency basis to be able to make such an award.
Commissioner, that's a very good point. As we were sitting here earlier, I just looked at that and said, maybe we need to go to 2 deadlines per the calendar year.
Yeah.
We grabbed that from another template document that we have already in our kind of arsenal, but.
Or
that's a
like
very
I said,
good
if we
point.
just have the language somewhere in there that, on a very, or like on an emergency basis, because this is, I think, truly rises to that occasion. But, and then I think the slippery slope that this creates, especially in this one circumstance, is that, are you going to put this out if, if other folks come forward and say, I want to apply for this at the same time, then you have competing factions for the same pot of money. There could be a more interesting or more needy situation out there that needs attention paid.
Yes, sir. I would like to go over the budget items real quick and then maybe leave y'all to debate this a little bit further. So we did take this into consideration with all 3 TIF districts. So I'm just going to go through the budget, first being downtown. Across 3 to 4 different lines, you could probably pull together somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $75,000. Now that is a range based upon if you wanted to leave a certain amount of money in each one of those lines. For example, capital or property acquisition in the central, which is the downtown, landscaping, which was at 40,000, wayfinding at 60,000, and marketing and promotions. Moving on to the south.
We'll explain, if you don't mind, John.
Explain the reductions.
Money from one or more of those lines to establish a fund in the central district that might be used to fund applications under the rehab program, correct?
Correct. And what
Only
you,
for the central, in that case.
I'm going to move through the 3
This
different
is
TIF districts. Yeah.
Each district will have its own pot of money.
Right, okay, okay.
So in theory, or ideally, you'd want to put enough money in the new program to fund 1, 2, or maybe even 3 projects.
Okay.
So we were looking at that $50,000 to $75,000 range. And with those different lines, we believe that you could pull some funding, not all, and still be able to accomplish the intent or partial intent of what was budgeted in those lines for the year.
Okay.
Moving on to the south, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Between the capital outlay and landscaping lines, you can probably pull somewhere in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. The capital outlay, which had $45,000 in it this year, was intended specifically for sidewalk replacement in that district. I ran some quick numbers based upon the bid that was awarded recently, and you would be able to, if you save back about $15,000, you'd be able to do both sides of one block. So it kind of can help you visualize, if you pulled 30,000 out of that, you'd only be doing one full city block. So that district, you'd have to delay those improvement projects probably for a later year, or we'd have to go find some other funding source. The north doesn't have much funding that you could reallocate, probably in the range of 20 to 26,000 between their general capital improvements and landscaping lines. Similar situation to the south TIF. If you pull funding from that, you're not going to be able to accomplish much in regards to sidewalk replacement.
So if the HIP was reestablished, where would that be funded from?
It would have to come from those same lines.
Same line.
Yes, sir.
And also probably kill the idea of an administrator.
So in the past, your residential rehab program was only in one district.
Right.
And our thought was that if you're going to reinstitute a program, we couldn't really articulate a justification for only having it in one district. So if you're going to reinstitute a program, our thought was that you'd reinstitute it in all of your 3 districts, but you'd make the funding for each district specific to that district. And that was our thought. Again, you could have a different thought. And from our perspective, the whole concept is if you don't have a program in place, that a particular grant or request can be funded through, then you're going to have to do some thinking about considering that request, because by definition, you're taking money that won't any longer be available for other things, and you won't have had criteria in place by which you judge the request, and you didn't have a program in place. And, you know, trust me when I tell you, I'm not trying to speak against the Wilhite's request. It's no secret, Mr. Wilhite, I've used his agency for 35 years in my private law practice, and there aren't many people in Palatka I think more of. He's been a dedicated, hardworking business person in this community for a long, long time. So, but my job is to talk to you about the city and about the programs that you have, and also avoid, to the extent that the staff can avoid, making a recommendation that might leave you open for criticism or you know, scrutiny. So that's our thought, was that if you're going to, and Mr. Rawls, you raised a good point, and the dates can certainly be changed around for sure. The house has been, if we get back to the Wilhite house, it's been in its current state for quite a while. So our thought was that another month probably wouldn't make that much difference. If it was to be the one that applied, they were to be the ones that applied for the grant. But you'd have a grant period, and as you said, remembering that there are specific criteria here that most houses in the district won't meet. I.e., that has to be an unoccupied home, one that, you know, is for some reason it isn't capable of being occupied. So you're probably going to limit the number of applications that could be made under the residential rehab program. But at least you'd open it up, and no one could then claim that you gave special treatment to one applicant when there wasn't even a program in existence at the time the application was made. And so that's our recommendation. But again, we're here to point some things out and offer some options and suggestions, and then we'll accept your guidance and direction.
Now, we had the HIP program in both North and South at one point, right? It was
Yes,
operating
sir.
in both districts.
Yes.
Just residential rehab was a seldom used program. It had only been used like one time, right?
Yeah, it was originally created in the South TIF district.
Mr. Russo, fifth comment.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The residential rehab grant is not, the Wilhite House is not available to the residential rehab grant as it is written today, because it only applies to homes that do not have a certificate of occupancy. There's only a few homes, 2 or 3 in the South Side that qualify for that. So the Wilhites, and the residential rehab grant is not necessary to deal with the Wilhite home, because that's exterior, and the house improvement program is exactly designed for that. So why not just fire up the house improvement, the HIP program, and use 15 grand, which is the normal grant for a project like that in the South Side. I mean, I don't see it's very complicated.
I was actually wondering that myself. Would it not make sense to do that? Because I'm going from memory, but weren't they asking for 20,000 or less?
No, we're asking for 15.
Is that what it was? Okay, I remember
We're
because they're
good,
putting
we're
up
good.
like 85 grand themselves.
Mr. Russo.
Maybe,
We're good.
I'm not
Just-
sure. Mrs.
just-
Wilhite?
Just yell from your seat. Let me run the meeting and you just do it from there.
But
Come on up, Mr. Parcher.
I got a lot of concerns about, you know, the way this is written, unless we're going to rewrite this on the fly right now.
Hold on one second. Go ahead.
Yes, they're asking for $15,000. They do have $100,000 that was spoken of last week. And I just want to share my heart with you guys about this specifically. And there is definitely a need here. I'm the son-in-law and I'm close to them. And but anyway, they they had the misfortune of having a tree fall on their home. Well, at that time, they were inundated with medical expenses, and they needed a new roof on. And well, they couldn't afford a roof, so the insurance company dropped them. And then turns around, you don't have insurance, front of the house is gone. Then it comes to making a very difficult decision for life, as it exists on this earth, is that my father-in-law had to pull the trigger on something that was very tough for him to do. This $100,000 comes from the sale of his business. And if you know my father-in-law, he has two loves. He loves Palaga Abstract and golf. And that was something that was near and dear to his heart. The $100,000 is honestly spent money. They've been raising their grandchild, Julie, since she was born. And this money was to go to her college, for her to go to school, get a master's degree, and pursue the things that she wanted to do. The business was in the family for 4 generations, you know. And I appeal to you, Mr. Mayor, board members, ladies and gentlemen, that if there is anything that can be done, I ask, please, that if it can be. That's all I'd say.
Any questions from the agency? I don't think they're living in the house now.
Do they have a certificate of occupancy for the house now?
There is a CO for that one. But the house hasn't.
They haven't lived in it.
Wouldn't qualify for a CO.
It
Was she
has to be
living in it
removed by the
before?
building official.
Is your question, was he living in it before or?
No, I was looking at the eligibility criteria, and one person said they don't meet the eligibility criteria, and part of it is, do they have a certificate of occupancy? Have they been told they cannot live in the house?
But it would have to be tagged by the building department, correct? I'm gonna ask the resident general contractor. It would have to be tagged by the.
Is the power still onto the house? Okay, they have the C.
Yeah,
They
CO.
have a CO.
Was that a yes? I couldn't hear it.
Yes, it was a yes.
Okay.
So it would literally have to be tagged as an unsafe structure so that, and power pull in order for it to be considered.
Because I was just trying to determine whether they met the criteria that was listed and what's proposed in front of us versus when the last time we met, we talked about coming up with an emergency policy.
Right.
Can I ask a question about the HIT program? Because I'm not familiar with them.
Go ahead.
All right, so if the HIT program was reinstated, does it allow for non-compete grants where we could approve this under the HIP? Because like I said, the biggest concern I have is we'd have to rewrite this tonight on the fly and then open it up. And somebody else might come up with a compelling or more compelling need. And what you say is $47,000? Best case scenario? And that could be, 3 people come up asking for money. That stuff, that can, because this says allows up to 50,000 for one grant.
I thought Jonathan said even up to 70,000, a range of 50 to 70,000. Am I right, Jonathan?
Correct. Go ahead.
Yes, Commissioner. The reason we propose this program is a cost share reimbursement grant program, and we do not have the issues that we've had in implementing the TIF HIP program in the past, of which we've spoke at length with the board. That's the reason that we picked this program, sir.
Can we modify the language to include emergency repairs?
I mean, the board can do whatever at this point.
What's that?
I mean, the agency has the ability to do whatever as it relates to this language. Commissioner Borum, you had something?
No, well, I was just thinking about, the only thing that I had was, weren't we supposed to be getting some detailed information back from the homeowner with the,
Included in our packet, Commissioner Bourne.
To the back of it, the back of your packet.
all right.
On the estimate?
Yeah.
It's in the back, it's in the back of your packet.
Yeah, okay.
So just one comment about repairs. If you look under Roman numeral 2, the language that was added states eligibility for consideration would include requires extensive repairs to either obtain a certificate of occupancy, bring the building up to current code standards, and or address visual blight. So under that,
it's a 3-prong.
Yeah, it's a 3-prong. So you could qualify it under that and this.
And I guess
I would
probably
be
just
careful
put
where you say-
or in between
I would be
each.
careful you say bring it up to current codes, because that would be very expensive for any house in the historic district. because that's just very broad. I would say uh, only the areas that are being repaired, like if they're putting a roof on, it goes on to current code.
Or repair any code deficiencies.
Correct.
And you also note that the criteria here is beyond occupied and uninhabitable at the time of the application, which we understand this is. Meets those two criteria. And certainly, Commissioner, we could wordsmith that. It says require extensive repairs to obtain a certificate of occupancy, or you could state,
I would stop at CO.
or make it habitable.
Let the building officials determine,
Go ahead, Commissioner Borum.
We're doing a lot of jumping around, hashing and rehashing. When we're making these type decisions, generally, I think we probably need to speak to our city attorney, who should be giving us these recommendations as to what we're trying to do with all of this language that we have and all of the things that we're considering, because it's not really even straightforward right now. Very
Again,
cloudy.
This is a difficult topic for me because of the people involved, but my only question to you is, if you're going to consider it as an emergency grant, what are the criteria that you're operating under? And if someone files an application tomorrow, then how are you going to judge that application?
And say no.
I'm sorry?
Or even say no.
Or say no. And I'm sorry, I can't take the lawyer out of me. So I'm simply looking at an equal application, and that's all I'm asking you is, I'm not arguing against this. I'm just saying, if you don't, our effort was to come up with a grant program that might be available to at least a limited number of people. So it wouldn't look like it was simply a single funding to a single applicant when no program existed. Under which an application, what do you say to the person that says, I'd have filed an application, but I did my research and I found out there wasn't any program available. So I wasn't going to file an application because there wasn't a program available. And that was simply our question was, how do you justify that? So we're raising the points, but you're the policy makers, and the city attorney, I think, is still on the line, and she can weigh in as she would. So we're not arguing against it. We're just saying that if you're going to make this, in our opinion, at least have it pass muster, then there probably needs to be a program that wouldn't mean that the only person who could qualify for funding is the one person who filed an application when there was no program active.
Right.
And that's all the point we're trying to make.
And I'll say this, and for the record, when I found out about the Will Height situation, I talked to Mr. Will Height and I said, hey, talk to Mr. Russo and see if there's something that can be done, if South Astoria Neighborhood Association would be in support of you coming before the agency. Because looking at that situation, it was bad. It's bad. It not was bad. It is a bad situation to be in. Now, I can tell you, the only thing that causes me a little bit of angst in this situation was when Ms. Wilhite came up and said they had $100,000. And there are a lot of people who don't have the luxury of having $100,000. I can point to another house in a very similar situation outside of a CRA district where they've been displaced from their house for 3 years and they don't have a penny. And they're literally renting something else and they don't have anywhere to go. And this option isn't out there for them because they're not in a CRA district. And one of the things that I want us to consider, this agency isn't really tasked with it, but it's more of a commission type thing, is how do we put those mechanisms in place for all of our citizens as well? And the other piece is, I've got less angst if it's a program, if it's a district program, which has a criteria like HIP, like residential rehab, like what's presented to us, which says, hey, this is a program germane to the district, and they qualified for it. And they qualified, the severity of the situation gives them extra points, but they qualify without any problem whatsoever. And so the next person can't say, hey, my roof has a hole in it from a limb that hit it. And now we find ourselves trying to cut budget items for whatever programs or things we have in place to do 10 of these things because we just had a very catastrophic hurricane or something that came into place. But I think if we truly think about it, just off of vision, there's not a more dire situation as relate in that district as it relates to the situation with the home. But if we create substantial fairness and fair play within this process, it allows us to be able to really modify programs that once existed and be in a position where we can justify in perpetuity how we fund these programs, as opposed to, I think, putting us up in a position where we open up a can of worms and there's going to be, we're going to be inundated with a gang of these applications coming. And what happens when it's someone who can't pull 100,000 out? The other question is, are there other mechanisms? I reached out to some folks with USDA, and USDA they've got grants for rural communities when you're 65 and older, where they'll give you $6,500. I've already reached out to someone and they're willing to talk to the Wilhites about that to see if they qualify for those grants, and they probably will.
But one of the requirements, you have to have insurance.
Well, on one of the grants, on one there isn't. But and so they're willing to look at it. You're also HUD certified, right?
Yeah.
And so there may be some opportunities from that standpoint as well. But I think ultimately, I even asked the question like, hey, would it be better to get an equity line and do it that way as opposed to running your money out? And so those are all things that are out there. And I don't know if everybody's explored all the options, but I think part of what we have to do, all of our hearts are with the Wilhites, no question. I can tell you my heart's there and it's bleeding. And I want to sit and explore every option I can to be able to help down to community fundraising, whatever's necessary to get it done. But I also want to make sure that, we don't find ourselves really sliding down a slippery slope or opening up a can of worms, so that in the future, we can't justify why we did it, how we did it. And if the next person comes in and gets turned down, we don't want to be in a position where we're showing favoritism. And that's a hard place to be in, particularly when there's an emergency. And if we have to come back and have another special meeting to deal specifically with how programs or this program or any other program be implemented, I'm okay with that. Because I think it's necessary for us to be able, one, to have these programs more so to help people than to allow people to have deferred maintenance. And this is exactly the type of situations that these programs were intended for, to help people, not to deal with folks who use it as a slush fund to do deferred maintenance. And that's where I think the heart of the program should be. And I'm glad that Palaca people are sitting in a room trying to help our seniors more than anything else. And we are trying to craft this thing in the most favorable light for everything, not just for this one situation, but for every situation that may come up in the future behind the Wilhites. Because there's definitely going to be another situation like the Wilhites that comes up in a community in Florida where we're prone to hurricanes and other things. And so that's just my comment. I wanted to make sure I put that on the record. Any other comments from the agency?
And a bit of history on the TIF kit. The reason why it started was to assist those folks with low income to address their code enforcement issues. And it started with Miss Margaret Wilhite and with her house on Dodge Street. And she was the first person to receive the funding through the program at the time. The TIF-HIP did address emergency issues in the past for people that were in crisis, and I'm not making a suggestion one way or the other. If we're going to open it up, though, it's going to be difficult to turn people away, whatever program it is. My thought was that if you opened it for the Wilhites, closed it until such time as the plan was approved and the budget was in place. But I see, no, I know the equity issue that's going to come up. I'm not arguing that. I understand.
You do that.
I do, but yeah. And the only other thought I had was that whatever programs are done, that there is a requirement to obtain property insurance once the work is completed, that be added to all the programs, so this doesn't keep coming up.
When they talked about the
Hold on one second. Hold on.
Well, when it,
Mr. Board, go ahead.
yeah,
Hey, 1 second. Hey,
well,
let's let Commissioner Board speak.
yeah, based on what they mentioned the last time about the property insurance, I thought they mentioned that it was about 20,000 a year, and it would that's what I thought I heard.
4,000 or 5,000.
Oh, no, I'm talking about for to have property insurance on a historic home.
I think the problem was, Commissioner, that the roof, if any of you have had houses that you've tried to reinsure lately, most of the insurance companies are requiring, I shouldn't say most, but at least mine and others, people that I've talked to, are requiring inspections before they reinsure. In my case, they required me to replace a roof on a rental home that I own that had 7 years of life expectancy left, and a water heater that wasn't leaking because of the tag on it had an expiration date they didn't like. And that was a condition of me having insurance. If I didn't do it, they wouldn't insure it. I think the Wilhite situation was their insurance company wouldn't let them buy the insurance because of the roof, and they didn't have the funding, which was going to cost between $20,000 and $25,000 to replace the roof.
Right. Okay.
In order to get the insurance, is my understanding. And we did meet with Ms. Wilhite, Mr. and Ms. Wilhite, as you directed us to this last week. And that's some of the information that we obtained. So it wasn't that they just said, we don't want insurance or we don't care about insurance. It was that the area insurance company said, we won't insure you unless you replace the roof. And the roof was going to be an expensive project. And they didn't have the funding at that time.
Right. The only concern that I had, it's just that this program, the CRA program, is truly under a lot of scrutiny throughout our state. And I know the commissioners here on the board here, Commissioner Campbell, Mayor Hill, and I know Commissioner McCaskill. We've gone to some of those conferences, and it's under attack through, at the Capitol, at state of Florida. So
Every year.
And it was I guess it was going to be voted on, and they didn't get enough push for it. So it's under some heavy scrutiny, and we just can't, we have to be very, very careful how we apply the funds. And again, so that's why I would like to get recommendation from our city attorney to be able to at least help me make my decision, because I know, again, if it's not in the plan, if it's not in the plan, not budgeted, whatever, we always deal with our city attorney, and that's what I learned in my CRA training. So that's my only reservation.
And I just wanted to clarify, and I agree with Mr. Holmes, a 4-point inspection is required to get insurance, I can tell you that, but I was suggesting that once the work is completed, if somebody receives CRA funding, that one of the requirements to receive that funding is that once it's completed, you get property insurance. I know they can't get it now.
Right. Any other comments? Quiet on the right side. Give me 1 second. Anything from the agency? You can come up with anything from the agency.
Well, yeah, I have a question. Let's start with the insurance. So what safeguard we have in place to make certain, not talk about specifically, but if we start relinquishing this kind of money, these funds, to ensure that they have insurance, because there may be some other things that may impede them from getting insurance. That's one thing. Secondly, if there's other avenues, I just want to put this out here, like a low interest loan, maybe, that could be something that we could offer, as well as a condition. I like to see a condition include that whoever received funds would have to still reside in those places. That must be a clause that they can sell the property within a certain amount of time, and they must occupy.
It's in there.
It's in there.
It's in there.
You have to reside for 1 year.
Okay, I want to just go on record saying it.
You want them to reside longer than the 1 year period?
I think so. I mean, you're talking about, it depends, because you're gonna, this is a $15,000 request. It could be more than that. I don't know.
You know,
if
what's
we have
crazy
limits.
is, and I'm just sitting there thinking out loud, but the county is sitting on over $1 million of SHIP money right now.
Mhm.
And we give $40,000 on houses
Well, couldn't she apply for the SHIP program?
We're so
She
far
would
behind
not-
right now in our.
not without insurance.
Yeah, I'm thinking we probably need to have something like that in our LHAP for something like that, but that would require, and I'll discuss it tomorrow at the meeting, see if there's a possibility, that maybe we can revise an older LHAP that we're still under and see if maybe we can do that.
But she runs through the same challenge with insurance with SHIP and emergency funding. And the other part with SHIP is that it's first come, first serve. And even with emergency funding. And so that list is 3 years, is 3 years long. And so
Is there a, when you say emergency funding, is there like an immediate emergency funding
There-
section of the LHAP?
yeah, but-
I've read the LHAP, so I don't remember seeing anything like it. Maybe we can.
it's in there, you got up to 30,000 emergency funding, but there's also an insurance requirement that goes along with it. So that's where you get hit. The only thing you got in there is like a $5,000 piece that's in there. And so it's extremely difficult. I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Jones.
But to continue, I also know someone that's a homeowner here in the city of Palatka, a couple of blocks up from the CRA area that has a tree through their roof right now. And they didn't have the resources to get it fixed, and they are displaced and have been for a few years. Same scenario. So as Robbie said, open it, then close it. I mean, you're not gonna be able to do that. We're gonna have people coming in wanting the same treatment. And I think we're gonna run into issues because we don't have the money. Because when they come to the city and go, well, I know this is a different fund or what have you, but you help, this board helps some other people and they're gonna want the same treatment. And I think it would be no more than right to help others as well. So I think we just need to be cautious and careful of, how we really go about it, because we'll have a floodgate coming open asking for assistance that we may or may not can provide.
One note, I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, you're fine.
The proposal had a 3-year requirement of occupancy in the home, otherwise you had to repay the grant.
I can't hear you, Mr. Manager.
There was a 3-year, the proposal he said the proposal has a 3-year requirement for residency. Commissioner Jones had raised the point of concern about whether the residence requirement need to be more than 12 months. I improperly stated it at 12 months.
That's what it says in here.
So he amended it. No, just messing.
Mr. Mayor, are you talking about the proposal that was presented by Mr. Griffith?
Correct. It says 12 months, right?
Yes, sir.
It says you have to live in it for 1 year after completion.
Is it?
They can't sell it within, prior to 3 years after the date of the certificate of occupancy for the new work that's done.
Okay. What about, is it 1 year for occupancy?
Yes, sir.
1 year occupancy, 3 years before you can sell.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Well, you can, you had the ability to do that.
So we have 1 year occupancy and a 3-year sale.
For the sake, go ahead, no, I'm sorry, Ms. Kitchens, go ahead right quick, and then if we got any follow-up conversation, we'll continue.
I think this could be easily resolved tonight. Simply agree to have the staff or the city attorney draw up the rehab document that the staff has looked at with the recommended changes that you have talked about, and then bring it back at the April meeting. Of course, add into it an emergency provision to give emergency funds, bring it back at the next meeting, and then either approve it or don't approve it. And if you approve it, then vote on whether or not to give the Wilhites the emergency funding. Real simple. Thank you.
I think we can.
You
Sure you can. You're the CRA.
No, I'm not asking you all this.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can.
What if we had a provision in here that instead of this thing flowing through as a residential rehab grant program, it's a residential rehab.
Commissioner Rawls, I can't hear you, sir.
I can hear
Just
me.
cut your mic, push your mic, just push your mic down closer to your mouth.
All right.
Yeah.
So what if we said this, instead of residential rehab grant program, it said it was a residential rehab and emergency grant funding program. So now you've got two different animals here. And I don't really have a problem with most of what's in here. I think it needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but have under the program description, have a paragraph that deals with emergency funding that does not have a condition on quarterly application, like this one says March, June, September. So it would give us the ability to be able to receive a grant application in an emergency condition. And then we would be able to respond to that and not have to wait for the application period to open up at the next quarter, and then go through, still have language in here that covers the like your point system in here. But in this case, under an emergency situation, you wouldn't need the point system because you're not competing against other landowners. But maybe instead of this has got a 60% grant match on the homeowner side, if I'm understanding it correctly. What if we dummy that down to 20% max? So we don't have everybody chasing us, but if somebody needs $10,000 or $15,000 for a roof, we can make that money available to them and do more for folks. Right now, you only got $45,000 you can spend. And in this case, if it's $15,000, that only leaves $30,000 for the rest of this budget year.
Third gone.
Yep.
But the thing
Right.
yeah, the clear definition in for emergency is going to open up a can of worms. Because
we got to start somewhere. Either that or let's just end this debate right now and say it can't be done.
No, I think the spirit of what you're saying can be done. I don't think that the answer is, so I think it's difficult to write in the emergency clause and have it be one just from seeing all the struggles with SHIP. I think writing an emergency clause is difficult to be all encompassing. I think what's easier is to look at the severity of the situation in your scoring and give more points. And that's far different. If you look at the scoring criteria, there's an opportunity to do exactly what you're saying without having to go through all those definitions. And it gives you all the discretion in the world. So when you look at your scoring criteria, you've got 4 areas. And when you look at project quality, the quality of the proposed improvements, the material, the decisions, all those things.
I think the impact is the biggest one.
Right. And so when you go back and you look at them, there's an opportunity to do exactly what you're talking about: redevelopment impact, the degree in which the project removes the blight, the length of time the structure has been vacant, the quality and the nature of the improvement. If you give a higher scoring criteria there, it does exactly what you're doing without having to pass the mustard test on anything else. And it gives us the ability, and you can justify it through what's in place. And I think that's the piece that's there as to how you put it in place. And I honestly think that the concerns that are raised by former council, city manager, from staff, and also from legal today are real concerns as it relates to the levels of scrutiny that could possibly come from it. I think that just from the conversation you're having with the agency alone, the opportunities exist, but I think it exists from the standpoint of being able to open up a program that looks like that's a combination between residential rehab and HIP, which I think accomplishes the desires of the districts. And it also meets the desires of this agency to be able to do things that are going to benefit citizens as well as remove blight. Just briefly, because we're getting late in the hour on this. Go ahead.
Role by having the Will Heights bring their plans and designs before that board, before it even comes back to this next meeting, so that they're reviewed and approved by that board to give back to this group as part of the packet.
Historic Preservation Board?
The Historic Preservation Board, because the house is in the district. So the any exterior alterations have to go before the board anyway. Don's making funny faces, so I don't
They got a meeting in April.
They are funny faces.
they're in, okay, I don't want to.
So-
Okay, Don, I'm sorry.
So
He's making faces, period. Okay, let's leave it at that.
Any further comments from the agency at this point?
I guess the biggest question is, how do you go forward with the date criteria that's in here? Are we just saying, go ahead and open this up in June, and, or can we change that around? I mean, I know it's nice that
Yeah,
it lines up
you
with
can
every
change it.
quarter, but
It can be changed by the agency to whatever date says there. You about to say something?
No, sir, that's just me.
I want to
somebody's
give
getting
Don-
angry.
No, it's not that. We keep saying the same thing.
Yeah, we're going back
We
and
say
forth.
the same
We're in the
thing,
weeds.
we-
So I think the reality of it is, I think my suggestion is that we adopt the program. Sonny, Ms. Krantz has been diligently keeping notes on the corrections or additions, modifications that have been suggested. We have the ability to come back on this and vote on it. And if there are any additional changes as it relates to timeline or whatever, this is the perfect time to speak up on those so that we can move forward and then we can entertain a motion. But I think we'll be here all night. So if we don't, depending on what our decision is, if the decision is to use the program that's presented by staff, then we need to go ahead and vote on it and set the timeline.
Say that again. If the decision is to use,
If the decision is to use this existing program that we received tonight, with the modifications that we just spoke of and the modifications that we asked for from the last meeting, then we just need to put the appropriate timeline in there as to how we want to take applications and do distribution.
is it possible that we take a look at this, because we have a meeting next month?
Mhm.
Can we, is that,
That it would definitely make sense to bring it back next month. I think that's what staff's recommendation was anyway.
I'd move then that we ask staff to bring it back next month at our regular meeting with the changes we
modifications.
discussed. Yeah.
Second. There's a motion on the table for those who couldn't hear to bring back the suggested residential rehabilitation grant program with the modifications discussed tonight for our next meeting in April. For approval, and there's a second by Commissioner Campbell. Is there any further discussion at this point?
Question.
Questions called by Commissioner Borum. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So we'll be back here for our next meeting. Are there any further comments from the agency at this point? Seeing none. So where we are, I just want to thank everybody for the conversation. We've had 2 spirited meetings with conversation, long conversation, but needed conversation. And I think at the end of the day, the heart of the community speaks, but also I think we're moving in the right direction as it relates to updating our plan, as well as updating existing programs or once existing programs. And so if nothing else comes from the agency, we'll stand adjourned.